We're now halfway through. This is week 27, so please congratulate yourself for sticking with us so far. This week we'll finish Chronicles and start the book of Ezra, a book you may not have paid much attention to in the past. As I said last week, the chronicler emphasizes that Judah did well when the kings of Judah observed the law of God and governed according to that law. Some of these kings are also portrayed as examples of goodness in the books of Kings, such as Hezekiah and Josiah, but their righteousness is given more depth in Chronicles. They make offerings in the temple. They emphasize devotion to the Lord. They respect the priesthood. There are exceptions. For example, when King Uzziah began to feel good about his military victories and building projects, he went into the temple to make a sacrifice himself rather than having a priest do it for him. A king can be a leader in war and construction, but when it comes to worship, he's to defer to the clergy. After the high priest stood up to Uzziah, the king broke out in a skin disease that afflicted him the rest of his life. Because of it, he was banished from the temple precincts, and he lived as a recluse. His son Jotham served as regent in his place. I'll make two more comments about Chronicles and then turn to Ezra. 1. The chronicler tells us that King Hezekiah called for a great celebration of the Passover in Jerusalem, a story that's not in 2 Kings. This feature of it interests me. People came not only from throughout Judah, but also some came from the kingdom of Israel. The chronicler notes that many of those who came from the north had not ritually cleansed themselves properly. So the king prayed on their behalf that the Lord would pardon them and receive their worship, since their hearts were in the right place. The other comment I want to make has to do with the fall of Judah. The chronicler says that Judah would be captive and desolate for 70 years, as the prophet Jeremiah predicted. But this is what is interesting. He says that the 70 years would be so the land could make up for its Sabbaths. Perhaps you remember that when we read Leviticus, we read that the land was to be left fallow every 7 years. Just as human beings were to be given a break 1 day in 7, so the land was to be given a break 1 year in 7. Evidently, they had not done that. And so the fall of Judah was not only because of the people's failure to worship the Lord faithfully and their failure to maintain social justice, but it was also because of their failure to treat the land justly. If we continue our abuse of the land, what may the Lord do? Well, now to Ezra. He doesn't actually appear in this story until near the end, but the book is named for him. This is one of 2 books that tell about the life of the Jews after they have returned to the land after their captivity in Babylon. It happened this way. As the Babylonian Empire began to decline, Persia was on the rise. Cyrus conquered Babylon, and one of his actions was to decree that the exiles from Judah could return home. Although some stayed in Babylon, and some even relocated to cities in Persia, many did return to Judah. Cyrus also decreed that the temple of the Lord was to be rebuilt, and the walls of Jerusalem were to be restored. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah tell the story of the resettlement and rebuilding, focusing on the opposition they had to overcome. For example, we'll read this week how Emperor Artaxerxes was persuaded to stop the reconstruction of the temple, lest it become a focus for rebellion. Well, it did, but not against the Persians, and not for many years.